Today I'm going to give you a quick run-through of the MPG-50 programmer. This programmer works as a universal programmer, but it's specifically designed for the Roland Juno 1, Juno 2, and MKS-50 synths. This brings all of the functions of those synths out to one panel. And it's got a lot of extra features as well. It's not just a bunch of sliders on a pretty panel. So you can see that, let's go to the main menu here. So you can see when I move a slider, that change is registered on the screen. So you can see which parameter it is that you're moving. And some of the parameters have little graphics, like the oscillator select. So there's a glide on and off button that's up in the upper left here. When you click that, you'll see that the glide gets highlighted. It's just to remind you that it's on. And in place of the range slider, we've got a transpose function. So you'll see when I hit shift left, it transposes. So shift left, shift right. So right now, I've got my controller keyboard. I've got the MIDI output of that going to the MIDI input of the MPG-50. And then I've got the MIDI output of MPG-50 going to the MIDI input of my Alpha Juno, which is on the other side of the room right now. So my Alpha Juno is on channel 1 right now. You can see in the MIDI menu, you've got two channels. You've got your main channel, which is currently being used by my Alpha Juno. And then if I had a second Juno or MKS-50, then I could select the model right here. So you can select Alpha Juno, MKS, and this is for a plugin called Futura, which is an Alpha Juno clone type plugin. It's got a little profile on here for that. And then this is for user CC maps, and this is for the Redominator plugin. So you've got profiles for all that stuff. But I guess let's set this second channel to user CCs, because I'll be showing you how to use those later. So let's go back to the main channel. So my Alpha Juno is on channel 1, and I've got Alpha Juno selected right here. So the MPG-50 can translate CC messages and change them into sysx for the Juno. And that is selected here. When you've got normal selected, that means that the translate function is turned off. The MPG-50 will just ignore incoming CC messages, unless it's a volume message or a glide message, in which case it'll pass that on to the synth. But normal mode, it acts pretty much like a PG-300. So in this mode, when you move a slider, then a CC message, so let me back up. When you move a slider, a system exclusive message will get sent to the Juno, and then a CC message will get sent. And you can record that CC message and play it back when it's in this mode. And when you play that CC message back into the MPG-50, it'll translate that back into sysx. Obviously, you can create a feedback loop by doing this, so you need to be careful what your setup is. So in this mode, the CC gets sent when I move the slider, as well as the corresponding system exclusive message. In this mode, only the CC message gets sent. So I move the slider, a CC message gets sent. Your DAW can record that and then pass it back through, and when the MPG-50 receives that CC again, it'll change it into a sysx. So that's one way that you could be playing and recording at the same time. And then in this mode, it will translate any incoming CC message that you've recorded, but when you move a slider, it will only send out a sysx message. That can be handy for certain scenarios. And then we're going to set this back to normal because that's the way that we're using it right now. And then you can hit Alt-Enter and it'll save your settings. So now every time you turn the MPG-50 on, it'll remember whatever your settings were for the main and aux channels. Now we'll go to page 2 of the MIDI menu. So in some cases, you may want to be using your Alpha Juno as a controller keyboard and recording notes, but also recording and playing back slider movements from the MPG-50 at the same time. And that can create a feedback loop. So to avoid that, each channel, the main and the aux, has a mapping function. So here I'm going to turn it on, and I'll set this to channel 2. So now any note message or CC controller message like the sustain pedal, etc., when that comes in on channel 1, that will get bumped up to channel 2. If I wanted to bump it up to channel 3, just do that. But in this case, I'm going to bump it up to channel 2. And when you're using this mode, you want your Juno to be set to Omni. So that means it will receive controller and note messages on all 16 channels, but it will still only receive system exclusive messages on whichever channel you've got that set to, which in this case is channel 1. So when I move a slider, it sends a sysx message on channel 1, which the Juno receives, but any incoming note message coming from the Juno, which is playing notes on channel 1, that's going to come in and it's going to see that it's on channel 1 and that it's a note message, and it's going to bump it up to channel 2 and send it to the Juno. That way you don't get a feedback loop. I know it's a little confusing, but this is a handy function, and it's kind of set and forget. For me it is anyway. I use it the same way every single time. Right now, I'm just going to turn it off. But the mapping function is really handy if you're recording loops and stuff like that. That way you don't create a feedback loop. Okay, so let's go back to the main menu. So if you're using an MKS-50, you've got a patch menu here. And this brings the patch menu functions into the MPG-50. So this selects the tone, the key range, high and low, the bender range, mod wheel sensitivity, detune, transpose, key mode, and then you've got 16 chords to choose from, and you can select them here. And then for the Juno 1 and 2, we've got another menu, and this one here lets you scroll through programs. Let's see. That's pretty handy, so I don't have to walk across the room in order to scroll through my programs. And then you've got the key mode, poly and mono, as well as the bend range. And the key mode can be selected by pressing Shift Glide. And you can do that on any page. You can just see that it's registering on the screen when I'm on this menu. Okay, so when you're on the main menu, if you hit Enter, you'll see that it now reads Assignable CC. So if I move all the sliders, you'll see that it shows that the Assignable CC is off. Oops, I just exited it. Let's do it again. Okay, so let's say that I want to make this slider right here send a message on CC number 12. So I can go like this, 11, 12, and you'll see when I look at all the slider assignments, it shows off, but then when I move over to here, it shows CC12. And you can see that it says channel XX. That means that whatever channel you've got your main and aux channel set to, if you've got user CC map selected, it's going to send on that channel. However, if you wanted to assign each slider to a different channel, you can do that. But you push in on the encoder and move it, and you can see now this slider here will only send on channel 7. That's pretty handy sometimes, but I'm going to set it back to the default right there. And then you've got 8 user maps. And this isn't loading the maps. I'm just selecting the map that I would like to load. And then when I choose it, I hit load. Hit load. And now it's loaded that map. This map is blank right now. And then if I wanted to store that map, I'd select the location that I want to store it in. And then I hit store. And now I can recall that user map anytime that I want to. That's a pretty handy function, especially if you're using a couple of different synths with your Juno. Okay. So now let's go over to the assign menu. The assigns can be a little confusing at first, but once you understand what they're doing, it's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to create a blank assign here. Okay. So assign A, assign B correspond to controller A and controller B on the front panel. And then you've got a third assign called assign P, which is assigned to the expression pedal. I don't have an expression pedal plugged in right now, so I'm just going to not use assign P. Anyway, back to assign A. So you can see that I've got one layer in this assign. Let's say that I want to control the filter cutoff. Let's say when I move this slider up that it makes the filter cutoff move down. And let's so you can see what's happening. Okay, so I'm going to assign the filter cutoff, and to do that, I push on the encoder, and then I move the slider through the range that I want controller A to control. You'll see that I moved it downwards, which means that when I move controller A up, it's actually going to move the filter down. So watch this. Okay, so that's not too interesting. So let's add another layer. Okay, so now let's make the resonance go up at the same time. So I'm going to go over to layer 2, and I'm just going to move the resonance through where I want it to. And now when I move controller A, you'll see that the filter sweeps down as the resonance sweeps up. So let's see what that does. Kind of a cool effect. Let's turn the chorus on. So now let's add another layer, and let's make that layer make the chorus rate do something like this. Okay, so I'll hold the encoder down, move the rate, and see what that does. I should probably reverse that so that we can hear it. When you cut off all the highs, it's not much chorus effect. All right, let's do it again. So now you can hear some of it. It's a cool little interaction. Let's select square wave with pulse width modulation, and let's change the pulse width modulation rate as well. So there's a fourth layer. Okay. Let's make that filter effect less. So move the minimum to 57. Okay. So Okay, so that's pretty neat. Let's say that we don't want to use controller A though to uh, make this assign happen. Let's say that we want to use the mod wheel. So I'm going to hit Shift Patch Gen. That selects the mod wheel. Now I've routed incoming mod wheel messages to that. So let's see what happens. That's pretty useful. So you can see the potential of something like that. And you can layer up to 5 controls on each assign. So you can control 5 things with assign A, 5 things with assign B, 5 things with assign P. Okay, so you can control it with the breath controller, the slider, or the mod wheel on controller on assign A. And then on assign B, you can route incoming channel pressure aftertouch messages to this assign. So you can do all kinds of things. You can do any combination and create some pretty animated sounds that would be pretty difficult to create with an Alpha Juno otherwise. So that's what the assigns do. And then to delete a layer on an assign, let's say I want to delete this one, Shift Enter. And then anything can be assigned. Pretty intuitive. Okay, so I'm going to turn the aftertouch off. And now let's go to the patch generator. Okay, so you've got a random patch generator. When you've got any selected and all of your masking is off, meaning that all the sections of the synthesizer are going to be randomized when you press enter. Watch. It's just randomized everything. Okay, I'm gonna go back into poly mode. There we go. Okay. So this is just creating random kind of gibberish, which isn't very exciting. Half the time it doesn't even make sound. So let's say we want to create some pads. So I go over here and I select pad. Each time I press enter, that's me using that assign that we just created. Alright, let's make another sound. So the random tone generator has all of these different sections here. So these sections can all be masked off when you're generating something random. So let's say I didn't want any of the DCO wave select or level stuff to get touched. I could mask that off. As you can see now it reads mask, and when I generate a new sound, now it's not going to change any of that stuff. You can see that the waveform isn't changing now. Neither are the levels. And so the things we can mask are the waveforms and the levels of the DCOs, any pitch modulation, so that's this stuff over here, the VCF, so VCF covers these 3 sliders, just the cutoff, resonance, and high pass, and then all the filter modulation. VCA is, it's only this, and that's permanently masked. That's so that you don't blow out your speakers Back to the Future style when you hit a note after generating something and it's just suddenly doubled the amplitude. Then we've got amplitude modulation, which is really, only this knob right here, the touch. And then we've got the LFO section, all of the envelope times. So that's T1, T2, T3, T4. The chorus, all of the envelope levels. And then this here controls the amount of randomization. And that really only applies to the parameters that are 0 through 127, not the switching parameters. Those just kind of have their own way of switching. And then this here just selects which synth you want to randomize. So if I want to randomize whatever synth I've got on channel 1, I select that. Channel 2, and then both at the same time. And say I have 2 Junos, if I hit enter right now, then it would generate the same tone on both Junos. But if I hit shift enter and did it, then it would generate a different tone on both Junos, which can be pretty fun. So that's the way the patch generator works. So you can mask things off and randomize stuff. And when you want to clear that out, you hit shift clear. And now it's all cleared out for you and you can start over. And so, it's a lot of fun to just play around with. You never know what you're going to get. And then the second page of the patch generator is just manual mode. So basically, if I hit enter here, it's going to go through and it's going to read and transmit all of these slider positions. So whatever you hear right now, which is not much, that's what you see is what you hear. So you can see that the position of the sliders right now don't actually make a lot of great sound right now. There we go. Using that assign again that we created. Then we've got another menu here. So this creates a scratch patch, which is sort of a good starting point when you're going to create a new sound. So let's select the type we want. We've got 3 choices. So we've got just the basic scratch patch, which is pretty basic. And then we've got another one here, which is basically the same thing, but it sets you up for a pulse width modulation type sound. So we'll generate that, and now clipping a little bit there. And then finally we've got filter envelope, which is the classic filter sweep. So that's basically what the MPG-50 does.